Well, welcome to the Keeping It Israel podcast today. My name is Jeff, and I'm your host. And we have a very interesting guest with us today. Jim Woodard is the pastor of Crossroads Church in Belle Chasse, Louisiana. And Jim's going to be talking to us today about ancient Paleo Hebrew. We'll explain to you what that is. I had to ask myself just a minute ago. But Jim, welcome to the show. It's great to have you with us.
Thank you, Jeff. Pleasure to be here.
Well, Jim, before we get deep into our subject today, tell us a little bit first about your background in ministry and life.
Well, the history is my mother carried me into a church when I was 14 days old, and so I've known little but that since then, and I've just had a wonderful journey with the Lord. I've had my ups and downs just like everyone else. I was in the oil and gas industry for about 30 years, and in midlife, I began to ask the Lord what He wanted me to do with my life, what He wanted me to accomplish here, and after a 2-year journey, we discovered that He was going to give us the opportunity to plant a church, and we did that 20 years ago, the Crossroads, and then in the course of all of that, about 7 years ago, I discovered ancient or Paleo Hebrew. And it was, by the way, Jeff, it was really, I guess what most people would say a fluke. I love the Aaronic blessing. I had a pastor previously that taught me the value of that, and so I use that at the end of every one of our services. And about 7 years ago in January, I stood up. I actually had my hands in the air. I was about to pronounce the blessing, and I said, "Oh, by the way, I'm gonna learn this in Hebrew for you guys this year." And I had no idea what I was saying because I didn't even know how many letters were in the alphabet at that time. And subsequently, as I began to start to try to find a way to learn just that blessing, I discovered that this language is so much more than I'd ever known, and I've been on an incredible journey since then. Not just pastoring the church, but learning so much more about God's Word.
Oh, that's fantastic. So let's dive into this Paleo Hebrew. I'm familiar with modern Hebrew, and when I say familiar, I've heard it spoken. I do not speak it. We have modern Hebrew. Then we have the texts that we study from the ancient scripts.
Right.
But Paleo is something that I'm just learning about from watching a few of your videos recently. But it's something that even predates the text that we find in things like the Dead Sea Scrolls and so on. Correct?
Absolutely. Those Dead Sea Scrolls are in a script type alphabet. The same letters, but they're just simply drawn differently in a more modern type of expression. Paleo actually means ancient. And so you might hear this type of Hebrew referred to as ancient Hebrew or Paleo Hebrew. It's the same type of thing. Now, that encompasses quite a story as you begin to look at it. And the interesting thing is that modern archaeology really is only about 150 years old. Prior to that, people didn't have the intensity about archaeological finds that they have today. And so what's happening in our lifetime is, and especially right now, archaeological finds are being made just almost on a daily basis. You're familiar with the excavation of the city of David. We were over there a couple of years ago and got to go down inside of that. And they're finding all kinds of artifacts that have Paleo Hebrew, ancient Hebrew pictographs used as the language. The time of David, the time of the kings, the time of the judges. Hezekiah wrote in Paleo Hebrew, and quite frankly, I believe Moses did. And I think it even goes back just a little bit further than that when you start to look at the whole story.
All right. Well, let's dive into it and give us a little bit of background of sort of where this comes from, because this pictorial kind of language. I mean, I've been to the Israel Museum. I've seen the pieces from even pre-Israel. And so talk to us, where does this pictorial kind of language come from, and how does it make its way into the Hebrew culture?
Well, the story is really exciting, and it's developing before our eyes, quite frankly. But it certainly appears through some very talented Egyptologists and archaeologists that this language began, the alphabet itself began when Israel was in Egypt. during their sojourn down there. And it appears as though Joseph may have been the originator, or his sons may have had a big part in this. And now they're making archaeological discoveries around the Levant and outside of the area of Goshen, where they would go on journeys or on trips and things like that. They're finding these pictographic inscriptions along with the hieroglyphics of the Egyptians. Now, the Egyptians used this hieroglyphic system to write. We've all seen those pictures of birds and snakes and all those kinds of things. And there were well over 1,000 of those different symbols that you had to learn to be able to communicate with that. Therefore, it took someone that was learned, a scribe that was educated, to be able to communicate those things. However, it appears that in the midst of that, and it was probably, it appears, because Israel was moved into that setting through their coming down from Israel, Joseph being there to receive them and setting them up over there in the Goshen area. It seems as though somewhere they discovered this idea, this incredible idea, that they could reduce this ability to communicate through writing down to about 22 different pictures. Now, many people would find this really hard to believe, but when you and I text each other, we may use emoji. We may do exactly the same thing. I was reading one day about a study that made the statement that the human brain absorbs a picture 60,000 times faster than text. So God knew this, and
wow.
Isn't that incredible? And so
that's amazing.
Yeah. And so the whole secret to this is that you have to understand the context in which this alphabet was used, this pictographic alphabet was used. And the context was, first of all, it was ancient. Secondly, it was nomadic. This was a nomadic people. They didn't live in big cities and things. Thirdly, they were agrarian. They had to raise their own food. They had to kill their animals. They had to do these things in life, and they were Semitic. Now, if you put that combination together, and we try in our modern technological setting, we try to interpret what these pictographs means, it becomes difficult. But if we can find ourselves thinking like Moses would, as he sat in the door of his tent, looking at animals running out across, and thinking about the daily things of life that they did, then all of a sudden we begin to get some insight into what they were communicating, about what the heart of God was having them communicate through these pictures that they were using. And it absolutely becomes fascinating. I know you've been to Israel many times, and most of us, when we go the first time, somebody is good enough to say, listen, if you're here for the first time, up until today, you've read your Bible in black and white, but after you leave and go back home, you'll forever read it in Technicolor. And of course, that was our experience on our first trip over there. But I've discovered now that I know a little bit about Paleo Hebrew, these pictographs, that I can also read the Bible in 3D. There's a depth to it that it's never had before, because I think we can begin to see through the lens of the writers what the original writer was trying to communicate with those that were either reading it or hearing it. And so it's really fascinating.
Wow, that is very, very intriguing. And I share your experience, of course. My first trip to Israel, I didn't really have super high expectations. And the people who are listening, if you've heard some of our other podcasts, you'll know a bit of that story. But absolutely, the Bible has come alive in a way that I never imagined possible.
It's amazing.
And so this intrigues me. What you're talking about is very fascinating. And let's get into it. Give us an example of maybe a word, something that you're referring to that will help people understand exactly what you mean.
Okay, let's do that. I brought my Red Nut PowerPoint board here with me. This is the way we do things in the South, real simple. And so let's talk about if you had a Strong's Concordance, the very first word you would run into is the word Av, and it's the word father in Hebrew. You might have heard it used in the term Abba. That's a little more personal, but it's the root word of Av, and it's two letters. Now, if we look in Paleo Hebrew, the Aleph, the first letter, is the picture of the head of an ox. Now, one of the interesting things you find as you begin to delve into this, you'll find charts and graphs and things where they'll show different pictures of this ox head. And that's because over time, with the difference of writing mediums, writing utensils, maybe even different people thoughts, then these little pictographs would change a little bit. Still has the same meaning. It's an aleph, and it stands for the head of an ox. Now, if you lived in that cultural setting, once again, remember, context, context, context. If you lived in that cultural setting, your ox was the strongest thing you had. And so if you had a big job, you had something heavy that needed to be moved, you needed to plow the ground, where did you go? You went to the ox. So that picture in your mind, in your understanding, would be for strength. It would be for the leader. Anytime you wanted to train an oxen, what did you do? You yoked him to another one. Jesus talks about that. And so this idea of strength or leader. The second letter, we'll go the right direction, is a bet. And the bet is the picture of the floor plan of a tent, if you were looking down on it. And so one of the things we have to understand in context about the bet is that it was the center of cultural activity. There weren't gymnasiums, courthouses, anything like that. The home, the house, the tent is where all of life took place. That's where you learned all of the principles and all of the character traits of life. And so when you thought about the bet, you thought about those things. You thought about, this is where I learn how to live. This is how I learn how to interact with people. So what happens when we put the two letters together, we have the strength of the house. Well, who is the strength of the house? It's the Father. It's Av. And so embedded in these words, if you can see them in their cultural context, it's not a different definition. It simply is a functional meaning. It gives you, in cultural context, a lot more functional understanding of what that word was talking about. And so, by the way, these are the first two letters of the Hebrew alphabet. And just embedded in that idea, there are so many things you can learn and so many different places you can go. Now, one more thing about this word, the word Father. If we'll simply take another letter, the letter He, and the letter He, as you see right here in the middle, is the picture of a little man with his hands up in the air. We might call that the touchdown sign that we see a referee make. But basically, what is it? If you see somebody on the side of the road holding their hands up or out in a field, what are they doing? They want your attention. They want to show you something. They want to reveal something to you. So this is called an infix because it goes in the middle of a word. It's not on the front or the back. And so this He turns the word father, Av, into Ahav, and it's the word love. Now, we've all talked about love. So many times I'll ask a group of people, give me a definition of love. And if you've got 100 people, you got 100 definitions. In the West, we think in abstract terms.
Yeah.
They didn't do that then. This meant something. And so if we'll simply go to one of the favorite scriptures of the Hebrew people, the Shema. Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God is one, and you shall love the Lord with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your mind. Well, let's read it this way. Let's use our new definition, and that is reveal the Father. Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God is one, and you shall reveal the Father with all your heart, your soul, and your mind. Well, it's not only in the Old Testament that you find that. Look at the book of Corinthians, 1 Corinthians chapter 13, that famous love chapter, right? I mean, we go to the very chapter that talks about love. And what did Paul say? Well, with our definition from the pictographs, he said, though I speak with the tongues of men and angels, but I don't reveal the Father, I'm just noise. What an incredible thought. And these little pictographs show us the depth of how those words can have, just such beautiful undertones and how they can show us really the heart of God. I think that's what this is all about. And, Paleo does not come without its distractors. Those people that would criticize and they would study language systems from the ancient times. And I've discovered that I honor all of those people that have spent a lot of time studying languages. But I have found, for me, it appears that ancient Hebrew was the simplest yet most sophisticated language system of all times. Because it just does things to you. It just shows you the Word of God in ways that you've never seen it before.
Wow. Well, this is truly fascinating, and I even just what you shared with us about the strength of the house and revealing the Father, man, that'll stick. I mean, that will stick, and that will preach. By the way, I'll make sure that
doesn't it though?
That I can. Yeah.
And by the way, think about this. That definition of love, that understanding of love, works in any relationship. If I'm in a relationship with my wife, I need to reveal the Father to her, the character of God, as a husband, as a mate. If I have a friend that I meet to play golf with, I need to reveal the Father to him in the character that I have in my relationship with him. It doesn't matter what relationship we're in life, that particular understanding of love fits because God has given us his character to pass on in every one of those relationships. It's just amazing. It's amazing.
No pressure, right? No pressure at all.
No pressure at all. Just show the Father to everybody.
That really ups the ante in your relationships. If you're listening today or watching today, that's I'll have to give that one some thought as well.
Yeah, well, actually, I think it really makes it a lot easier, Jeff, because I don't have to put on a facade with anybody. If I love God, if I love God, then I'm receiving his character traits. And by the way, I'm trying to show them back to him. He loves me, I love him. What does that mean? We're both trying to show each other the traits of our Heavenly Father. And if we learn to do that, if we read the Word, if we practice fellowship with the brethren, and we do the things that we're called to do, then that should become a natural process. And once that becomes a natural process in the family of God, then it should start to become a natural process in the world where we interface with people. So, I mean, God's got a plan. Let me tell you, he's got a great plan. We just need to follow his plan and not ours.
Yeah, great perspective. Let's look at a specific word. What you're showing us here is we can get a much deeper understanding. And maybe you have a couple more examples.
Okay, let me show you one of my favorites. When the ancient was sitting in the door of his tent, he was watching things that went on in life, and he would learn life lessons based on the natural. And so what he would then do is he would turn those things into word pictures as he tried to explain his thoughts. A really great word to understand this is the word dog. We're familiar with dog. When we go to school, we learn our letters, A, B, C, D, E, F, G, and we learn that D and O and G is pronounced dog. Now, we've got to know what a dog, somebody's got to show us a dog so that we'll be able to put those things together. And just because we look at the word, it doesn't tell us anything about the character of the little animal that we're talking about. The word dog in Hebrew is kalev. Kalev, as a matter of fact, you might recognize it a little bit better by the word Caleb. That was Joshua's friend, and his name was Caleb. Right. It's spelled the same way. Well, let's look at that. There's a root word, and it's the lamed and the bet. We've already looked at the bet. That's the picture of a tent or a house. And the lamed is a shepherd's crook. It's upside down, which indicates that it's working. It's taking control or authority. And that, by the way, is the word heart, lev, in Hebrew. And what is the heart? Well, if you'll read what the writers of the Bible talk about, the heart is what controls the house. David talks so much about his heart. He says, your word have I hidden in my heart so that I won't sin against you. He didn't say I memorized all your verses so I wouldn't sin. He says I put it in my heart. So they had some kind of understanding that something was taking place here in the heart region. As a matter of fact, we've all experienced this idea of grief. Where does grief happen? It happens right here. You get this heavy feeling that hits you, And so the heart's a very important concept. So we take that root word, the heart, and we want to know what the character of a dog is. We add the letter kaf to it. The kaf is an open palm. And it's a very interesting letter in the Hebrew language because it speaks, it's actually the word all. You can use it for the word all. It's the word that says, I'm going to give you access. In the word bless, it's simply, I'm going to give you access to me. That's what God does when he blesses us. We've all done this when someone came to our front door. We said, well, come in. No one had to teach us, to sweep our hand back to give them an invitation. So when we look at the word dog and we want to know, well, what's the dog's character? Well, quite frankly, in Hebrew, it tells us the dog's character is all heart. If you've ever had a dog for a pet, you know that. They're all in. They're all heart. They want to be your best friend, right? And so every Hebrew word has these kind of connotations embedded in them based on these pictographs. It's just enthralling when you begin to start to dig into it.
Okay, that's amazing. Now, I want to make sure I got this right. Leave the picture up for just a sec.
Oh, okay.
You said the first one is access.
This is kaf.
The second one is the
access, and then this is the word
and then the
heart.
second is
Lev.
the word heart.
Yeah, all heart.
But you also said that individual letter, the shepherd's crook, indicates control.
Okay, yeah. Well, so what is the heart?
No, so just
yeah.
let me go with this for a minute. I'm being a little bit silly, okay? But you said access, control, and then the tent picture or the house.
Mm-hmm.
Could it also be argued that the dog has access to the control of the house?
Well, yeah. I think that's a side business.
Because I've had dogs and they seem to rule the roost a little bit. But anyhow, like I said, I'm just being silly.
Yeah, I don't think I don't. You're absolutely right. We too have the same thing. I think I probably failed to mention the lev, the heart, is what controls our house. So this is the house of God. Paul says, don't you know you're the temple of the Holy Spirit? And so our heart, according to biblical understanding, is what controls our house. And so, it's all just embedded in every one of these words.
Yes, and our dogs all know that they have
right.
our heart. So
that's right.
That's good. That's really good.
Isn't it cool though the way it shows the character?
It is. It's amazing. It's absolutely amazing.
By the way, when Adam named all of the animals, he didn't just pick names out of the air. If you'll go back and look at all of the animals through their pictographic description, you'll find that he named them based on their character. He knew their character.
Interesting. Wow. You know what? We could probably go on and chat about this for a long time today. You have a wealth of information, and we appreciate so much you sharing it with us. And I suspect that maybe we can have some future opportunities to dive into some more of this, maybe in the future.
I'd love to.
Before we part ways here, if we were in Jerusalem, I would say shalom.
Right.
Talk to me a little bit about shalom before we part ways here this morning.
Well, so true. We would say shalom when we greet or shalom when we part. And what would we mean? I wish you well. I hope all is well with you. I'm not exactly sure that was the original intent of the word, especially when you turn it into Paleo pictographs. The word shalom is peace, as we know it. We would say in English, peace.
Yes. And
it's an interesting thought and a concept. And Jesus, you might remember in John 3:8, Jesus told his disciples, he says, guys, I'm going to leave you, but he says, I'm going to give you peace. I'm going to leave peace with you. And then he goes on to say something very unique. He says, not the world's peace, but my peace I'm going to leave with you. Well, if you're paying any attention at all, you just discovered that there's at least two kinds of peace that's available to us, the world's peace and the peace of God. And so what is the world's peace? Well, my definition of the world's peace is the minimal amount of chaos that we can all agree to live with. That's where we're going to find peace, and it never lasts. But let's look at the word. It's 4 letters, and it starts with a shin, and the shin looks like a W, but it's also the picture of 2 front teeth. And think about this once again in the cultural context. 2 front teeth. You see one animal catch another animal for dinner, and what does it do? It takes those 2 front teeth and it begins to rip, to tear, to destroy, to separate, so that it can eat that food. So the shin stands for that. It stands tear, rip, separate. It also stands for the number 2. You can say the number 2 with that. The lamed we've already looked at. That's a shepherd's crook that shows authority. The vav we have looked at that. That's the nail that attaches. And the mem we have looked at. That's the waves of water that stand for chaos. So if we'll take this word picture of peace, what does it tell us? It says destroy the authority that establishes the chaos. Destroy the authority that establishes the chaos. That's the peace of Jesus. What did John tell us back there in one of his little letters? He says, for this reason Jesus came, to destroy the works of the devil. What's the work of the devil? It's chaos. And so peace for us, if we're looking for biblical peace, we're looking for a peace where we don't have chaos in our lives. And as a pastor, I'm sure you're familiar with this. There's so many times we deal with people that come to us and they've just got chaos. They've got drama. And so we have to look for the reason that that's happening, the source of that drama. And the source of that drama, we don't wrestle against flesh and blood, right? So the source of that drama is always the evil one. And what do? We find out how Jesus wants to destroy his authority and forbid him from attaching that to us. That is shalom.
Wow. Well, I think that's a great thought to end on. Destroy the authority that establishes chaos. I'm going to do my best to remember that. That's good stuff. Jim, if people want to know more about this, if they're intrigued by this and want to hear more of your teaching, tell them where they can find some of that.
Our website is HebrewWordPicks.com. It's very simple, one word, HebrewWordPicks.com. And if you go there, as I mentioned, I've written 2 or 3 books, and you have access to them there. My partner, Marla Jean Kleinsmith, has done the art. You can see that behind me. These beautiful pictures. She listens to the teaching, and then you're speaking of word pictures. She gets these beautiful pictures in her mind and creates these beautiful pieces of art. You see the one over this shoulder. That's Pesach. That's the Passover, and you can see where the door has the blood on the lintels and on the doorpost. It's just beautiful. And then the girls have also created a line of jewelry. We have all these things basically as resources so that people can learn more about what we're talking about and use them as witnessing tools. Use them as tools to learn about the love of God and to share the love of God. That's the reason we're here. That's the whole reason we're here. And so HebrewWordPicks.com.
And on that website, they'll also have access to your teaching videos and so on.
Right. I've got a YouTube channel, but we connect that to the website. And so if you want to go study a certain word, you can look at the artwork. You can maybe have a little article that I've written about it. And then in many cases, there'll be a video there. And by the way, if someone would like to go to that website, there's a place that you can sign up for our newsletter. Give us your email. And our webmaster, Trent, Marla Jean's husband, has created this chart of all of these letters, these pictographs that we're talking about. And you can download that. And you'll have it there to look at. Perfect. And you'll be able to see all the things we've been talking about today.
Well, if you're watching, if you're listening, I want to encourage you to go to Jim's website, find out all you can about this, HebrewWordPicks.com. And Jim, it's been so great to have you on the show today. And I hope that we get a chance to connect maybe in person someday. And I've never been to New Orleans. I'd love to come there, but who knows, maybe even in Jerusalem.
Well, yeah, either one of those places, preferably Jerusalem, but New Orleans will do as a backstop right now. And if you've never been here, well, you need to come and be hungry when you get here, let me tell you.
All right. Well, I'll have no problem with that, but it's great. God bless you, Jim. And we hope to see you again soon.
Thank you. It's been a real joy being with you today, Jeff. God bless you.
Well, thank you for tuning in to the podcast today. I really hope that you enjoyed my conversation with Jim Woodard and found it as intriguing as I did. The point here is not that we're trying to change the meaning of the words, but just gain a little bit more insight, and maybe the better word is perspective. I think of it like a camera moving around an object, and you get a different angle, a different perspective, a different view of looking at the very same thing. And I think that's really what this has been all about, and it's a great way to explain it. Thanks so much for tuning in today. And First Century Foundations, we want to remind you, is a ministry that exists to support the land and the people of Israel and to educate Christians about the Jewish roots of our faith. We're a charity that relies on your generous donations, and we're so grateful for those. If you like this podcast, if you like Keeping It Israel, then please consider giving. You can go to our website, firstcenturyfoundations.com, to learn about the many humanitarian projects that we support in Israel and to find out how you can be a part of the critical work that we are doing there. Thank you so much for your generosity in giving. It's making a huge difference in the lives of many people in Israel today. And please don't forget to hit the subscribe button on the First Century Foundation's YouTube channel if you're watching there. If you're listening on your favorite podcasting platform, then subscribe to our podcast so that you can get regular updates when we post new material. And if you could share a review, that would just be so amazing, and we'd appreciate that so much. Please like us on Facebook, and I believe that would be at FCF Jeff, or you could just search First Century Foundations and it will come up. And we just love for you to stay connected and engaged with us in that way. The land and the people of Israel have a special place in God's heart and a critical role in the history of the world. And so today, now more than ever, we want to remind you that as Christians, we stand with Israel.